This is my presentation on the Hutterian Brotherhood, or the Hutterites. They originated from the Anabaptists, which is reflected in their beliefs. So, as far as their beliefs go, they publicly declare belief in the 12 points of the Apostles' Creed. They do not believe that Christ's body and blood are present in the bread and the wine. They believe in non-resistance, which has played a major role in their history, which we'll cover later. Communal living, which is based on the early chapters of Acts and the fact that Jesus and the disciples shared money and goods. Adult baptism is one of their core beliefs, which is after 5 to 10 years of instruction, they'll request a baptism, and they have to show clear signs of a regenerate life. And after the request, they have meetings with elders daily during a 6 to 7 week probationary period, which after that they can be baptized. They have a heavy emphasis on education, and they promote strong family values. Divorce is forbidden among the Hutterites. They stem from the Anabaptists, much like the Mennonite and the Amish, although the Amish and the Mennonite, they do not have much of a written history or on the Anabaptist theology, where the Hutterites, in contrast, they do. They have written words of their beliefs in the Schleitheim Confession, which was written in 1527 in Schleitheim, Switzerland. It contains 7 articles, and among them is their no violence in any circumstance, the Christ's body and blood are not present in the sacraments, and rejection of all oaths. They do not take any oaths. They also use, along with the Schleitheim Confession, they use the account of religion and faith. It was written by Peter Reidemann in 1540 to 41, and he is considered the second founder of the Hutterites. As far as their organization goes, there's approximately 30,000 of them in North America, the Hutterites. 75% of them are in Canada, and 25% of them are in the United States. And we'll kind of see why that is when we get to their story. There's 3 groups in North America that share the same doctrine and heritage. They call these groups lutes. We've got the Shemitah lute, the Darius lute, and the Lehrer lute. And each lute has one elder who's responsible for the spiritual leadership of the colonies within the lute. And then within each colony will have a minister who's the chief executive along with his advisory board. They have a colony manager who's responsible for businesses, and then a farm manager who manages all of the farms. They will have approximately 150 people per colony, and at that point they will come together and I guess decide whether they want to start a daughter colony elsewhere. As far as their worship goes, it's a simple worship with simple furnishings, kind of a one-room schoolhouse type of church building. They have daily worship in the evenings. They call it Gebet. It begins with a song. All their services begin with a song, and in the daily service they have a sermon and prayer. And then on Sundays and holy day services, they call them Lair. They'll start with a song and meditation on a topic, prayer, and then they'll go to their main teaching and end with another song. Christmas, Easter, and Pentecost are the high points of their church year. A couple interesting notes of their church service is the most ministers preach sermons from the 16th and 17th century in German. And men and women sit on opposite sides of the center aisle in the church. So, and then their story, kind of hitting on some high points of their story. Um, they've constantly been persecuted and moved, but they persevere. They've been well under 100 people a couple times in their history and seem to regroup. They've dispersed numerous times and regathered. They've been caught in the middle of several wars, as we'll see. They were under constant harassment to convert to Catholicism in the 15th and 16th century, or hundreds. They converted some early Lutherans who were also displaced. And they abandoned communal living several times in this history as they moved, and they recommitted to it each time. And today they hold to it firmly. So here's kind of a map of their moves around, just to kind of cover some highlights. In 1527, John Blaurock brought Anabaptism to Tyrol region, there on the west side of the map. He was martyred in 1529 when Jacob Hutter took over, and that's where they got their name, the Hutterites, or the Hutterian Brotherhood. They were under constant persecution in Tyrol, and they martyred Jacob Hutter as well, and that kind of caused them to migrate to Moravia in 1540. And then, so from 1565 around to 1592, these were the golden years for the Hutterites. They really grew in numbers. But then came along the Turkish War, the 30 Years' War, and the bubonic plague. All but wiped out the Hutterites. They were down underneath, well under 100 people. And then in 1620, the Habsburg dynasty took over the Czech lands, and they were Catholic, and they persecuted them even further until they were invited to Transylvania to help develop the land there. So they moved to Transylvania, and then in 1755, a group of Lutherans who had also been expelled from Austria met up with them in Transylvania and converted to Anabaptism, I guess, and became Hutterites with them, so increased their numbers there. And then in 1767, a Jesuit priest named Delphini was sent by Empress Theresia, who was of the Habsburg dynasty in Austria. She sent him to eliminate the Protestants from Transylvania. So they fled Transylvania to Wallachia to escape. So they lived there not very long, a couple, 3 years. And then that area was contested between Russia and Turkey. So they immigrated into Russia, into modern day Kiev. So they immigrated just north of Kiev there, where they were promised ample land and security. Well, in 1842, they moved to more fertile lands within Russia, and this was one of the times where they partially abandoned the communal living for these fertile lands in Russia. But in 1873 to 1879, Russia removed the military exemption, so they all moved to the Dakota Territory in the United States. And here was another instance where they semi-abandoned the communal living in the Dakotas to get land. But then during World War I, the United States passed the Selective Service Act, which would require them to serve in the military. And Canada promised military exemption, so they all immigrated to Canada and settled up there. Well, then during the Great Depression, some of the colonies moved back to the Dakotas and bought the abandoned Hutterite colonies. And after World War II, some more returned to the U.S., settling in Montana. So that's how they came to be here. And like I said, there's 75% of them are in Canada, 25% in the United States. And that pretty much covers the Hutterites.